Welcome back, brave souls and seekers of truth. In our last journey together, we unmasked the toxic twins of envy and jealousy, exposing their corrosive effects on our psyche. Today, we're diving into another battlefield of the human condition, the clash between anger and patience. Anger, it's a wildfire that consumes everything in its path, a tempest that clouds our judgment and poisons our relationships. But what is anger, really? It's not just a fleeting emotion. It's the ego's primal roar, a desperate attempt to assert control in a world that often feels chaotic and unfair. Anger is the ego's favorite weapon, precisely because it's so intoxicating. It gives us a false sense of power, a momentary high that masks our deeper fears and insecurities. But like any drug, the come down is brutal. The destruction left in anger's wake, broken relationships, missed opportunities, regret, is the true cost of this emotional addiction. Let's confront an uncomfortable truth. Anger is often celebrated in our culture. We admire those who don't take any crap, who fight back, who rage against the machine. But this glorification of anger is a dangerous illusion. It's the ego's way of justifying its own toxicity. This collective denial has catastrophic consequences. Unexamined anger corrodes our souls, destroys our connections, and perpetuates cycles of violence and misunderstanding. Breaking this taboo requires brutal honesty. We must dare to look at our anger head-on, to name it, to understand its roots. Only by dragging anger into the light can we disarm it. This isn't comfortable, it isn't pretty, but it's absolutely necessary if we want to free ourselves from anger's destructive grip and create lives of genuine peace and authentic power. Let us first explore, where does this fiery emotion come from? Why does it seem to consume some of us more than others? To understand this, we need to journey back to our earliest experiences. Let's face it, most of us never learned how to handle our feelings. We weren't taught this stuff in school. Our parents might not have known how to deal with emotions either. So when we're hurt, scared, or confused, anger often becomes our go-to response. It's like we only know one dance move, and we use it for every song. Think about it. In relationships, how often does a simple misunderstanding turn into a shouting match? At work, how quickly does frustration become rage when things don't go our way? Even with our kids or parents or our pets, love can twist into anger when we don't know how to approach a situation. Anger is the loud voice of a quiet hurt. It's what happens when we don't have the words to say, "I'm scared," "I feel disrespected," or "I need help." It's the emotional equivalent of using a sledgehammer to hang a picture. Way too much force for what we're really trying to do. Anger often springs from childhood wounds, from moments when we felt powerless, unheard, or unloved. That child who was always told to toughen up, who learned that vulnerability was weakness, they're now an adult whose anger masks a deep fear of being hurt. The kid who never felt good enough, always striving for impossible standards, their anger now disguises a gnawing sense of inadequacy. Consider the child raised in a household where anger was the primary mode of communication. Shouting, slamming doors, maybe even physical violence. This became their blueprint for handling conflict and expressing emotions. Is it any wonder they now struggle to respond to frustration with anything but rage? Or think about the one who learned early on that their needs and feelings didn't matter. Perhaps they had a parent who was absent, physically or emotionally. Or maybe they were constantly overshadowed by a sibling's needs. This child might grow into an adult whose anger erupts whenever they feel ignored or dismissed, a desperate attempt to finally be seen and heard. Trauma, too, plays a crucial role in our relationship with anger. Those who've experienced abuse, neglect, or other forms of trauma often develop a hair-trigger response to perceived threats. Their anger becomes a protective shield, a way to keep the world at bay and avoid further hurt. But it's not just childhood experiences that shape our anger. Our culture, our societal norms, even our gender expectations all play a part. Men, often told that anger is the only acceptable strong emotion, might default to rage to mask fear, sadness, or vulnerability. Women, on the other hand, often internalize the message that anger is unladylike or unattractive, leading to a dangerous suppression that can explode in unhealthy ways. Our fast-paced, high-stress modern world adds fuel to the fire. Constant stimulation, information overload, the pressure to always be on, all of these factors leave us raw and reactive, primed for anger to take over. And let's not forget the role of our physiology. Lack of sleep, poor nutrition, hormonal imbalances, these can all lower our threshold for frustration and make anger our go-to response. Understanding these roots doesn't excuse destructive behavior, but it does give us a starting point for healing. By recognizing the wounded child within, by examining the lessons we've internalized about anger and rage, we can begin to rewrite our emotional scripts. This awareness is the first step towards transformation. It allows us to approach our anger with compassion rather than judgment. Instead of seeing our angry outbursts as character flaws, we can recognize them as misguided, obsolete attempts to meet very real needs for respect, for safety, for connection. By shining a light on anger's origins, we strip it of some of its power. We begin to see that our rage isn't an uncontrollable force, but a learned response that might have become obsolete, one that we have the power to unlearn and replace with healthier alternatives. Anger promises strength, but delivers only destruction. It convinces us that if we shout loud enough, hit hard enough, or hate intensely enough, we'll finally feel in control. But it's a lie, because anger isn't about power, it's about powerlessness. It's the ego's way of saying, I can't handle this. Anger blinds us to solutions, to nuance, to the humanity of others. It's a funhouse mirror that distorts our perception, magnifying threats and minimizing opportunities for understanding and growth. It turns the rich tapestry of human interaction into a battlefield where everyone is either an ally or an enemy. This distortion feeds directly into what I call the righteous rage mentality. It's a mindset that thrives on anger and self-righteousness. Righteous rage tells us that our anger is always justified, that we have the right, even the obligation, to unleash our fury on the world. It's the voice that shouts, "They deserve my wrath." The righteous rage mentality is anger's toxic enabler. Where anger burns hot, righteous rage fans the flames. Together, they create a perfect inferno of destruction and self-delusion. This mindset blinds us to our own flaws and the complexity of human situations. We become so focused on our perceived rightness, on how we've been wronged, that we fail to see our own role in conflicts. Our capacity for empathy? Incinerated. Our ability to find common ground? Up in smoke. The love for our partner? Reduced to ashes. The respect for our peers? Scorched beyond recognition. Our patience with our children? Burned to cinders. The trust in our friendships? Charred and crumbling. Our self-respect? A smoldering ruin. In anger's inferno, every positive emotion, every constructive thought, every chance for connection becomes fuel for the flames. It devours our relationships, our opportunities, our very sense of self, leaving behind nothing but the acrid taste of regret and the cold ashes of what might have been. In this narrative of perpetual victimhood and justified retaliation, we abdicate all responsibility for our emotional state. But here's the truth. Life isn't a battle to be won through force. Your anger, no matter how justified it feels, doesn't give you the right to harm others or yourself. The righteous rage mentality sells us a lie, that anger is strength and patience is weakness. The antidote to this toxic mindset isn't suppressing our anger, it's transcending it. It's about seeing clearly, acknowledging both injustice and complexity, hurt and hope. It's about taking responsibility for our emotional responses while also extending compassion to ourselves and others. Ultimately, overcoming anger and the righteous rage mentality is about reclaiming our true power. It's about refusing to be a slave to our reactive emotions, choosing instead to respond with wisdom and patience. It's about recognizing that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from mastering ourselves. But what's the alternative to this destructive anger and its righteous enabler? It's not just the absence of rage, it's the presence of something far more powerful: patience. In the face of anger's seductive roar, patience whispers. It declares, "This too shall pass." Your peace is not determined by external circumstances. True power lies in your response, not your reaction. As we close this first part of our exploration, I invite you to sit with this idea. Feel the weight of anger you've been carrying, and imagine what it would be like to set it down. Envision a life guided by patience rather than rage, by understanding rather than knee-jerk reactions. In our next video, we'll delve deeper into this transformative patience. we'll explore practical ways to cultivate it in our daily lives, to use it as a shield against anger and a sword to cut through the illusions of our ego. Thank you for joining me on this journey of self-discovery. Remember, every time you choose patience over anger, you're not just changing yourself, you're changing the world.